Hi, Ruth. How are you doing today?
Sandra, how about you?
Good, good. Thank you so much for coming on my podcast, Engineer Her Path. We're live on LinkedIn and YouTube. And just to give some background to everyone, that's where we actually met off LinkedIn. I can't remember, clearly over a year ago. I can't remember. I think we started being active and producing content on LinkedIn around a similar time frame. And then we become acquainted through there. We've talked so many times. And I just think your story is so amazing and going to be inspiring to so many people. And, you're a longtime woman in STEM in the aerospace defense industry. And I'll let you introduce yourself a tiny bit.
Okay, well, I'm Ruth Smith. I am currently a career coach. I've spent my entire career, as you mentioned, in the technology industry. I had a degree in computer science, and I started the first 10 years as a software engineer. And I've moved through various leadership roles, including product development. I've been a customer experience officer, technology lead. And as you mentioned, I've also been an engineering leader at a defense company. And along the way, I have founded two companies. So I'm a two-time founder. And I've worked for large Fortune 500 companies, and I've worked for five high growth startup companies. And I've learned so much in my career. And I recently left my job as chief revenue officer for a software consultancy, and I went out on my own full time starting the 1st of June of this year. And as you mentioned, we both joined or started following each other in late October, November 2023,
Yeah.
and then and picked up each other's journey. And we have a similar kind of background and interest. And I always love your perspective on women in STEM and finances. And I feel like that's integrally tied to what we do in terms of our careers and how we map those out. Our finances play a really big role in that. So I'm excited to be here to talk with you today.
Yeah, yeah. And I remember one of the things that bonded us was we actually have a former company in common
Yes,
that we
we
both
do.
worked at, and just so many similar experiences being in the same type of industry for so long and just different career struggles and all that. So, yeah, let's talk about how did you start evolving and getting into this career coaching and why are you passionate about it?
Well, actually, my husband summed it up best. He said, well, she's finally getting paid for what she's been doing organically her entire career. My first foray into career coaching was in 2008. I volunteered and led a career transition group through my church. And if you recall, that was in the Great Recession that started in 2008. We had a lot of people who lost their jobs, and so our church had started, counseling people who were going through job loss. And I flippantly said to one of the pastors, I said, I know prayer is really important, but people in transition need a lot more help besides just prayer. And he said, "Great, can you be here Tuesday night?" So, uh, that led to a 4-year volunteer stint, and I really loved it. I loved helping people who were in transition determine what their next steps were. We worked on all the basics, including resumes and interviews and outreach and networking. And I loved doing that, and I loved helping. But I've also been a hiring manager in my career,
Hmm.
and I've worked in sales for a staffing company. And I've also owned a staffing company. That was one of the companies that I founded. So I literally have hired over 1,000 people, and I probably have interviewed probably 8, 10 times that number of people. And so
Mm.
I've also mentored throughout my career. Obviously, being a woman in STEM, when I started out, there were no women in STEM.
Hmm.
And so it was always an interesting place. I wanted to give back, especially to women who were coming along. And when I was in the defense industry, I was tapped as one of 8 leaders who led emerging leader cohorts for the company. And I really enjoyed that experience. And it was interesting when I went to work in defense, I didn't even know how rare it was to have a woman who was leading an engineering division. And so I had people from other divisions reaching out, going, wow, Would you consider mentoring me? So
Hmm.
all of that is sort of an accumulation of something that I'm passionate about, the STEM field, but also mentoring people, whether it be leadership or it be career advice. It's feels like a natural progression, and why I kind of decided to step out on my own and do this for this next phase of my career.
Wow. Yeah. So you've seen it from all different sides, from being the person applying and interviewing for jobs to the person hiring and then working at some of those recruiting agencies and understanding how all that works. That's really interesting. I didn't know that it went so far back from it started as kind of a ministry. And I love how you point out it's great when people talk about, yeah, you need God and prayer, but you also have to combine that with action. Same like
Yeah.
the job searching type of
Yes.
conundrum, right? Where people are like, yes, God will remove. It's like, yes, but on your side, God is asking you, what are you going to do to get
Right.
yourself a job, right?
Right. We have to put ourselves in the game. It's not manna from heaven. It's really, you got to put some effort into it.
Yeah, yeah. And I know part of your story is you have a tragic story about a very abrupt layoff
Hmm.
and you also can share that experience
Hmm.
because not everybody. I'm gonna admit I haven't ever been laid off, and I'm not saying I'm special or that's unique or
Hmm.
something. I think I'm just fortunate enough it's never happened to me, but that is something that many people can relate to, the heartbreak of abruptly losing a job. So if you want to tell us a little bit about that, you don't have to go into all the details, but like kind of like your feelings around that.
Yeah, that is interesting. I was like you, Sandra. I've had a 30 plus year career and I've never been through a job loss. And I kind of prided myself on that.
Yeah.
And I'm actually grateful now for the experience. So at the end of 2023, I was let go from my director of engineering job. And when I say I was literally walked out, I was walked out of the building. It was demoralizing. It was really heartbreaking, but also it gave me the time to reflect
Mhm.
and really decide what I wanted for the next phase of my career. It also showed me a lot of things. I was really floored by the number of people who reached out to me in that transition. And it can be lonely and isolating, but I think it was a really impactful thing because it taught me to appreciate where a lot of my clients are coming from because they've been through the job loss and the fear, the anxiety, the anger, the grief. They're all cycles that you have to deal with, but always I feel like when a door shuts, it really is true that other opportunities open up. And sometimes the abrupt nature of it is exactly what you need to kind of take those next steps to maybe rethink your entire strategy.
Yes.
And I'm grateful for that. And so I feel like it does help me relate more to my clients, and I'm appreciative of it now.
Yeah, it's interesting because if you kept going on that trajectory up and up and maybe to VP, you
Hmm.
never really have that awakening. Because I tell people when you're really successful doing, it's easy to just keep going on that
Yeah.
predefined path that a company or corporate America has set for you.
Yeah.
And I've also realized in my, even though I had a relatively short job search, when I posted about that, people can relate to that.
Yes.
Anybody, everybody, every industry, every type of position. And it's some of those more like maybe demoralizing lower moments in life that people bond and relate to more than just like, oh, you became a director and all that. Not that people aren't celebrating when you win,
Right.
but it's
Right.
just it's those other times where it's like, oh, she's a human too. Even
Yeah.
someone that got to director level could, potentially be walked out the door. And
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
that's crazy.
It's interesting you brought that up because like I said, I sort of it's made me more vulnerable. And if you think about it, it's your vulnerability that people really relate to,
Yes.
because you don't want to see this perfect career. You want to see the highs and the lows and the setbacks and the successes, because that's really who we are as humans. And I think you could look at any life, any career, and see those similarities. So I'm grateful now, but I've had to kind of choose vulnerability. And I don't know if you can relate to this, but being a woman in engineering, especially coming up through the ranks when there were no other women, you were just taught to be strong and to push through and to kind of deal with it.
Yeah.
Vulnerability really didn't have a place for a long time in my career. And So it's something that I'm having to challenge myself to be more of in this market. And the more I do it, I think the more people it helps. So I'm learning through the process still.
Yeah, and I'm sure if anything, it helps you become a better coach and more
Hmm.
empathetic and relate to people. And I totally agree with you about all that. And it's funny because when I announced I was leaving my job earlier this year, I was really worried how people would perceive that.
Yes.
And I was thinking, are people going to think, bad things, or I'm burnt out, or just negative things? But people were so nice, and like you're
Yeah.
saying, people can relate to you more when you're revealing hard, tough things, decisions you're making that may, on the outside, not seem so great, right, or
Yeah.
socially acceptable. But what do you think is the biggest thing that you learned from that experience?
Well, I thought I already knew this, but it's to take charge of my career. And it
Mm,
goes back to something that you've already alluded to, that when you're on that path, it feels successful. And honestly, in my mind, I thought, you know what? I'm just going to stick this out. I'm just going to ride this wave until it'll be my last and final job. I know I talk to people now that are like, I'm looking for that last job. And, while some people find it, in my mind, I was thinking, this is my last job, but I think what it did was it made me complacent. And
yeah,
I could have had more opportunities if I kept pushing up that path. But I think losing it was the thing that made me step back and I hate to say this, but eat my own dog food a little bit. That I've always been like, you need to define what's important to you now, because what matters to us when we're 20, 30, 40s, or by decade, it changes. And what we want changes. And so if you can't articulate that and write that down, then we always fall back into that same pattern of going after exactly what we've come out of. And loss is a perfect opportunity to reset your priorities and figure out what matters to you, and make sure that you pursue those things and
yeah,
not be taken along by the tide and in life. And so I that's one of the biggest lessons, is that you can always evaluate what's important to you and don't put blinders on, because I think you have a more fulfilling career if you're willing to make a change or a pivot. And I know you're one that's taken, a sabbatical of sorts. I think our children have gotten this down, because I don't they're not going to take a 40-year consistent career and work forever and ever. It's already been shown that they take more sabbaticals. And I think it's okay to take a setback, a step
yeah,
back and evaluate and figure out what's next, because we're happier overall. We make more money throughout the course of our careers,
yeah.
and our jobs are more satisfying. So I think, taking the step back, and that it's okay, and giving myself permission to do that.
Yeah, I love that. I was making the comment to someone yesterday on LinkedIn that we don't get summer vacation anymore.
Yeah.
As adults, if you don't actually intentionally plan time off, you could end up working decades and
Yes.
years and kind
Yes.
of just on autopilot. And like I said, it's kind of like life happening to you versus you happening to your life. And I love how you're talking about how you don't really, you can say you believe something, but until you truly live it out and you're forced to really reckon with your values. I always say the same thing too. Like I prioritize like health and family and this and that. But then, earlier this year, that really forced me, like, do I truly value that right now? Do you see what I'm saying? It's
Yes.
one thing to say that. People do the party line
Right.
of, yes, that's what I believe in and these are my values. But when you're forced to actually confront your values and live by it, right,
Yes.
that's the best example. And that's, to me, the coaches that are the one you want, right? Because they're not just saying the stuff. They can be like, yes, and this is how I did it in my past and in my career, and I truly live by this and embrace it. But I love how you're able to turn that around. And like you're saying, it was very demoralizing the way they did it, because there's also just a better way they could have done it, right? And that must have been a huge blow to your
Yeah.
ego and morale for a while. And yeah,
It was. I got outreaches the week after I was let go about opportunities, and I told them, I said, "Listen, I have to take 2 or 3 months off. I said, I've come from a toxic environment. I need to get rid of some of the toxicity in myself and really evaluate next steps. So I had to force myself to take the time because it would have been easy to just jump back
Yeah.
in again. And that I had to have a lot of restraint. And so I understand where people are coming from now. And it is important. It's what you said that, I've got to live out my values. And it's one thing to say them, and it's another thing to live it out.
Yeah, but I love that advice about how you're talking about taking some time off and having a mental break from one toxic situation so you can process it. Because I don't know how many times I've met someone off LinkedIn and they're telling me about some type of situation with their work, and you think it happened like yesterday or a month ago. And it was more like 4 years ago, but they haven't really processed it and they're very upset about it. And carrying that type of mental energy around while they're in a job search, I mean, I can't imagine. It's hard to get another next position. So how do you work with people about that? Maybe like processing events and their mindset in a job, because it's a battle. It's a very up and down. Your emotions are a little all over the place. You get your hopes up about something and then it doesn't come through.
I think you've hit the nail on the head about one of the biggest challenges that I'm finding in coaching people. I mean, I think a lot of people think, oh, you must spend an inordinate amount of time looking at their resume and their LinkedIn profile and, teaching them how to write a good networking email. And that is really just a very small part of what I
Right.
deal with. I
Yeah.
think it's what you're alluding to is the mindset and determining, have they really processed through? Because if you haven't done that, then even with your best intentions, your negativity is going to show. It's going to come through
Absolutely.
in your interview. It may shine through in your early weeks at a new job, and you carry that around, and you need to let that go. So I spend a lot of time working on the front end with people. One, deciding if I want to work with them, if I can work with them, and I explain, I'm not a magic job genie. That's not how this works. That we spend a lot of time on the front end figuring out what they want and their next steps. I determine how they let go of some of the past things so that they can move forward, and also shaping a strategy before we even get started.
Yes. Being
Honestly, I
strategic.
spend probably less than an hour on people's resumes and LinkedIn profile. The rest of the time is a weekly mindset call. And I also find that there's two categories of clients I've worked with a lot. One are people that have been let go and are still struggling to find work. And some of that is mental, that I've got to try to help them before they can be really productive. And then I've found there's other people that are really miserable in their jobs. They've been
Mm.
through either a leadership change, a management change, something's happened at the company, or they've been through layoffs and now they've taken on double the workload without any additional pay. Some of them have been given managerial duties without any title changes, and they're miserable, and they're such perfectionists. They're still trying to please their boss while looking for another job, and I really have to push them to find that ideal role, to quit focusing so much on their present. I know they want to do a good job, but they've already determined they're working in a toxic environment that's not serving them. So they need to put more energy into looking. And so I find a good deal of my coaching is really about the mental as much as the
Yeah.
technical.
And it's funny, like you mentioned, I bet people think it's all about the tactics. Like,
Yes.
what can you
Yeah.
do? And to be clear, yeah, you're not a recruiter. You're
Hmm.
not you're not trying to
Yes.
match people. You're
Yes.
trying to help people find their
Yes.
jobs.
Yes.
And if people actually master those tools, I always tell people, if you can master the tools of finding a job, you'll never be hungry. You'll never be without a
Right.
job. Right.
Yeah.
And it's very easy to have someone hand you a job on a silver platter, but that's not the job market all the time. Right.
No.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
That's interesting.
there's been a lot of changes in the job market, and that's the other thing I'm grateful for. I've lived through three or four pivotal events,
Hmm.
and one is the dot-com crash of 2000 when tech worlds faded. The other one was the 2008 recession. People don't realize this, but nationally, the unemployment rate was between 8 and 15%, depending on where you lived.
Wow.
We've been averaging 4 to 6%, six for tech jobs. And then, we all lived through COVID. I think we want to forget it, but our economy took a real hit and a lot of
Yeah.
people lost jobs during that. And now we're in this weird time right now where it's actually a company centric market in terms of hiring, and it's not a candidate centric. So, if you master networking and how to look for a job, I think it's what you just said. You will never go hungry. You will have an opportunity. So, focusing on your emotional intelligence and curiosity and compassion and communication, those skills will always serve you, but you have to be willing to pivot and to make subtle changes and tweaks in your career and what you're looking for, I think, to be successful. Because if you only know how to do one thing, one way for one industry, you're going to really struggle in the job market.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so true. And I always give people the analogy of, you'll have this first date with someone
Yes,
and they keep talking about the ex and the terrible relationship.
yes,
That's the negativity that people bring when they have a negative job experience, and they're bringing that into the interview or to the new job. And people, they don't want to hear that. They want to know, I mean, if you're talking bad about a former boss, aren't they going to assume you're going to talk bad about them or their company, right? So
hmm
yeah,
it's a
yeah.
great point.
Yeah, and it's just that's what I wish. I wish people, honestly, they had the financial resources, like you're saying, to take that little bit of a break and a reset and kind of like process that. And then how do I go into this job search more strategic? I love how you said strategic, because I think people are not strategic anymore. And they're, I don't say not all people. I think that's one thing I see is people are not strategic in their job searches. So, do you notice that? And what do you think about
Totally.
that? Because I feel like a lot of people are just like, well, I got rejected from 600 jobs, so I'll apply to 1,200 more. It's like, well, you're just doubling down on kind of what's not working or what doesn't seem to be working for you, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
you're spot on. Yeah, that's the thing. I probably the number two thing I do too is I work on the mindset, but we work on a strategy. Tell all my clients that I work with that I'm like, I don't want you applying to 100 jobs. I want you to focus
Yeah.
on probably 10 or 15 companies or positions that you're really interested in, that there's something about what the company does that resonates with you, the mission, or there's the job description is something that you go, wow, this would be me. I know I could do a really good job at this, and that you could go into an interview cycle feeling like you could have an impact. It's not about hundreds and hundreds of applications. And honestly, that's another problem in this market right now is that a lot of positions when they post, it's not uncommon to get a couple of thousand submissions in a day. And
Right.
we, at my previous role, when I worked full time, we posted a senior software engineer role, and within 48 hours, we had over 2,500 applicants. Most companies only have one recruiter working right now. It is not humanly possible for a recruiter to evaluate that many resumes effectively. So it's no wonder people are getting lost in the shuffle. Or, there's things about being an early applicant, but being a qualified applicant. And the recruiters and the HR people I talk to say somewhere in the neighborhood of 65 to 75% of the applicants they get are not remotely qualified for the role. And so it's a waste of their time. And so I say be very targeted, very strategic for the type of role, the type of company, and when possible, use your network and leverage your connections to get intros, to get kind of out of the stack, so to speak, so they can go directly to that stack and pull your resume and go, wow, we know about this person, somebody internally or somebody we know referred them, and it gives you more credibility right off the bat as opposed to just hoping that your resume stands out. And now with AI, every resume stands out. I mean, everybody looks like a perfect candidate on
They all
paper.
stand out in the same way.
Yeah, so you've got to do something. I think from a communication and a humanity standpoint to stand out in this market.
Yeah, make that human connection. So I'm curious because you did make it to C-suite level. What do you think
Mhm.
differentiates, or what changes did you have to do, or how did you have to grow to get to that C-suite level versus just like, maybe like middle management or a leadership?
Well, the big shift for me, obviously, when you go from being I call it a careerist, whatever your technical role is, because I work primarily in technology, and you get your first managerial role. The big leap for someone taking on their first managerial role is sort of having to step back and not rely as much on your technical skills and be able to delegate that and be able to help guide people in a more hands-on way. A lot of new managers have a tough time because they all their value is tied up in their technical skills.
Yeah.
And so they feel like they're losing if they let go of those skills. And so some of them end up becoming micromanagers because that's their way of hanging on to their technical skills and saying I've got a managerial title. But when you move from a managerial role up to a C suite, it becomes very strategic. Like you have to think and function from a 10,000-foot level.
Mm.
And it's like mastering a battleground in terms of seeing how all of your people are laid out strategically. It's about monitoring the progress of all the various strategic initiatives going on within your purview, also helping shape a vision going forward that's a year, 5 years, even 10 years out in terms of being a C suite leader. And it's definitely stepping back from your technical skills and trusting your people to be able to take your vision and initiative and be able to execute on that. And it's a lot different. There's more pressure, the stakes are higher, and you're held more accountable for the return on investment, for the financial shape of the company, and making sure that you're doing and working on revenue producing initiatives. And there's a big difference when you step into that.
Yeah, I'm curious. I'm just gonna, you can answer this question however you want. I have a theory about this. So, Barbara Corcoran, one of the sharks on Shark Tank, she says she knows if someone's a good entrepreneur after they walk out onto the stage. Like it's
Mm-hmm.
that quick.
Mm-hmm.
They can tell their
Yeah.
presence, everything. Do you think that people, not necessarily even just you, in an interview can tell someone's C-suite material, leadership material, management material, or are they just meant to be an individual contributor? Can people suss that out in an interview?
I actually do. I definitely do. And I think I agree with Barbara. There's a gut instinct that you have
Yeah.
for being able to size people up, but also you can suss that out through the interview questions and asking people how they would handle scenarios, getting them to explain how they've solved similar challenges in a previous life. I'm also very interested in people's core strengths. I'm a big Strengths Finder fan. I'm not certified in that, but I have a lot of my clients take that. I've actually taken that as well. And so I think there are certain skills that line up that are more applicable to people at the strategic level, especially the skill called strategic. That's being able to view and make plans and decisions from a 10,000-foot level. And I happen to have that as my highest trait. So in my mind, when I see a person, a candidate, or even a particular challenge in the workplace, my mind immediately develops three scenarios for how to solve the problem. And I have an A, B, and a C. And obviously, I want to execute on the A first. And if that fails, I want to spin quickly and pick up plan B or pick up plan C. And it usually doesn't fail me. I mean, I can't really think of times, but there is something there, and I can't always put my finger on it, but you can just sense something about people
Right.
that they would be excellent in a particular role. And I've had people fight me on my choices before, but I've never been wrong when I've gone
But
to
I think
bat for
women
somebody.
were very intuitive. And
Yes.
when you know, you kind of, and even when you can't put it into words,
Hmm.
because think about how many times over your career you're like, I just had a feeling about this and how it's going to
Yeah.
go, or this is not the right person. And yeah, I think it's always dead on. You should listen to it. But yeah, I always wondered because I think a lot of it can be taught, but there's some just a nature and like you're talking about, some people don't have that ability to zoom out and look at something from a 10,000-foot level. There's nothing wrong with that, but
Right.
then they
Right.
would not be good at the C-suite level, right? And they
Right.
probably wouldn't even like it, even if they did
Yes.
make it up to that. Yeah.
That's an important differentiator. I feel like people think that, rising to the C-suite is the ultimate career goal, and it's
Right.
not. It's about being able to work what I call your zone of genius, where you're able to work in ways that you're really gifted and skilled in, and being able to use those skills the majority of your time in the workplace. None of us gets the luxury of doing things we're skilled and gifted at all day long. I mean, there's
Right.
always elements of things that we have to do that are not necessarily our strength. But if we can be in those roles where we're able to use them the majority of our time, we're happier, we're more productive, we make more over the course of our careers, and it just feels less stressful to be in that spot. So don't be married to what people think is your quote normal career path, because I think what's normal is what works best for you and will make you happiest, and not what other people think it should be.
Yeah, I really like that because that's probably society and everybody saying, "Oh, C-suite is the most coveted roles." But what if you're a person you don't you want to tinker in the details, you want to do things at a project level, you want to be involved in picking piece parts and things like that, and
Hmm.
designing things, and we would never get to do that at C-suite
Right.
or management level. Yeah.
It's true.
Okay, I want to talk about another huge pivot you had was leaving, corporate America, your last C-suite role that you had. And I remember when you sent me that email because you're on my newsletter list and you're kind of inspired by me taking a sabbatical. So I want you to talk through how you came to that conclusion and what's life been like since you've been in that phase now for a few months.
Yeah, well, good question. And I do remember us exchanging that email because you were like, "Wait, what?" But you had been my inspiration. I was so proud of you for stepping back from a role and evaluating what you wanted
Oh, I
next. And
see
I
you
think
as so
that's
much
great.
farther ahead of me in life.
No, I have been feeling for a while that I needed to step back. I started the career coaching almost on accident. When I first was let go, I did what a lot of people do. I landed on LinkedIn, and immediately, because in defense, they don't really like you on social media so much, but I hadn't been on it a lot, and I thought, wow, what happened to LinkedIn? There's so many creators out here, and there's people writing more substantive stuff. It's like I thought this was a job board, and it's so
It
much more than
changed
that.
radically.
Yes,
Yes.
dramatically. So I got curious, but I started writing. I just threw out a couple of posts, and they seemed to resonate with people. And so I just set out some tiny goals to maybe write twice a week on Tuesday and Thursday. And then I thought I can up it. I'm going to try to do it 3 days a week. And then over the course of several months, I got up to five. I've tried seven and I dropped back to five because I think that's my sweet spot. But I got really interested in what people were saying about careers. And some of it I think was complete garbage. Then there were some others out there that resonated with me. Like, I discovered you and I loved what you wrote about finances and, particularly women taking control of their finances and women in STEM. That resonated with me. And so I started just organically putting that out there. And I had some people come to me go, "Hey, would you coach me?" And I'm like, "Okay." I didn't even know what to charge. So I figured that out little by little.
Hmm.
But I interviewed for the job for chief revenue officer. I knew the team really well. I'd worked with them at three companies. I loved those guys and I was excited about the role. But I told them, I said, "Hey, I've started writing on LinkedIn. I'm talking about careers and this is kind of a side hustle." And they were like, "Not a problem. Like, go for it. We love it." But I just over time, my following started growing and I started gaining more clients. And I was kind of trying to balance my full-time role with the coaching, but I realized that my full-time role was just not resonating with my heart. I really longed to be able to do work from anywhere. I wanted to be able to work remotely. I wanted to be able to travel if I wanted to travel, and I wanted to spend more time with family. And so I just ripped the band-aid off in the middle of May. I gave my 2 week notice. And you talked about listening to your gut, and some people who follow me know that my sister Mary was battling stage 4 melanoma, and I wouldn't know at the time, but she ended up passing away middle of July. And by leaving my job, I was able to be with her to help every stage of her cancer. And it didn't end the way that we had hoped or prayed, but I'm so grateful because I had 8 amazing weeks that I was working remotely, but I was there with her, during every phase of it and could help out with, her husband and family and kids and that kind of thing. And so even since then, it's been really good because I've been able to spend time with them. They're in a different city. And this is probably the first week that I haven't been with them more than I've been at my home in Nashville. But I've been able to work because it doesn't matter. I've got a computer and my clients are mostly remote. I only have a couple clients in Nashville. Everybody else is out of the country. So I think it goes back to listening to your gut, just knowing when you need to take the plunge. And, obviously I had a supportive husband who's always been supportive. It goes back to, I think I'd share with you, we've always tried to live on one income, one and a quarter income,
Hmm.
and try to, put back so that we didn't feel financially strapped when we made these decisions. And he supported me through, starting 2 companies. And so I'm really grateful for that. And so that's what I gave myself like 6 to 9 months to replace all of my income through my coaching, and each month have been steadily growing. And so I'm just really thankful for this season and that I can do something that I love. And it's a culmination of my entire career and all the cumulative knowledge that I've gained that I want to be able to share with others.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. And do you think your sister being sick kind of also gave you some perspective on life and kind of what's important and kind of helped you reevaluate?
Oh, totally. Also, believe me, she was my biggest champion, but she was also the biggest kick in my pants. And I love that for her. And it really resonated because she's like, you're healthy. And she said, there's no reason why you can't, do these things. And she really
Mm,
taught me to make the moments count because when you're given a diagnosis that you don't know the outcome, you get really serious about packing in as much life and as many memories and as many challenges. And a lot of people don't know she was a very successful realtor. She just started a real estate career 5 years ago, and she was in the top 3 realtors in her area for the last 3 years running, and she did really well. And a lot of people don't know, but she was still doing real estate deals on her deathbed. People were like, I was just texting her. We signed this closing. She didn't even tell me. And I'm like, she was in the hospital with MD Anderson. And but she was doing something that she loved. And she told me, she said, I'm so proud of you for starting this. She said, double down, invest in yourself. And she said, put in the effort. And she said, you just don't know where this is going to take you. So I'm very encouraged by that. And her words of encouragement kind of fuel me every day to not take things for granted. And we've been traveling more. Again, because my husband's been remote since COVID, and we can be anywhere in the world and do the work that we do. And so that was another reason I did it. And I'm so grateful now through her example and her encouragement, and so many other people that have finally just said yes to themselves and taking the chance.
wow. Yeah. So it's really not truly an early retirement for you.
Mm-mm.
It's more like you're moving on to this encore career, another chapter of your life. One thing I've been realizing, especially with talking with a lot of women in STEM, is nobody wants to retire early.
Yeah,
There's something about it where people don't like that phrase. They don't
yeah,
see. I mean, I'm sure also a lot of it's our self worth is tied up into our jobs
right.
and careers. But to tell a woman in STEM she's going to retire early, because even when you were laid off, you were producing content on LinkedIn, and I think it's just when people are so high achieving and ambitious, they're not going to spend even their downtime just doing nothing. And even like you said, your sister, she was working on a deathbed because that's what she loved, not because she
Right,
had to. She wanted
right.
to serve her clients and all that, and I'm sure it also set up her family. She passed away way too young. I'm so sorry to
Mhm.
hear that. But yeah, let's talk a little bit about just the difference between like retiring early and having this encore career. Because what do you think about that? Because that's my theory that women in STEM are not gonna just retire early and do nothing. It's great to have this financial independence and to get to where
Right.
they have money and options and all that, but we'll find other ways to make an impact in the world, right?
Yeah. I think for me personally, it comes down to mental stimulation.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think, listen, I'm all for not having workplace stress. I mean, I know both of us have worked in environments where the stress is really high. I don't miss that. But also, I realize that we all have something to give back. Like we have
Yeah.
this cumulative knowledge that other people need to know about and hear about and see. And so it's not about taking a back seat. And, studies have shown that people that fully retire and do nothing have a shorter lifespan
Yes.
because
Very
we're
true.
we're meant to be mentally stimulated, physically stimulated, and while we may not have the energy level we did in our 20s, we certainly have high mental acuity. We certainly have this desire and this drive in us, and so if we can find a way to package up our skills and retool them, I just think it's more beneficial to us and we continue to feel like we're giving back and we're making an impact in life. There's people I know that, have completely pivoted. They waited until retirement age or they reached a, certain level of income and then they just went, nothing. I know you're a Dave Ramsey fan. I heard on his program a couple of weeks ago, they had a guy that called in and said, he had saved for retirement and he was 38. I think he was part of the fire movement and he wanted to know about taking retirement. And it was interesting. Dave told him, he goes, I don't think that's a good idea. He said, I think it's okay to take a break. He goes, but at 38, he said, I've had people that retired and went to the golf course and, within six
Yeah.
months, they
Get
weren't
depressed.
here. Yeah, they were depressed. They were fighting all that. And he goes, he said, while I'm not going to argue that you've definitely saved enough money to do that, he goes, would that really make you happy over the long term? He said, because all of that energy and creativity and experience that you use to get you to this point are exactly what you can do to drive another, phase. And he said, I have a friend that's, retired, but he goes, but he works 2 hours a day. And he said he splits his time between a home, in Jackson Hole and another one in North Carolina, travels in between. He goes, but he owns a business and he's, stimulating, other people and challenging himself. And I think that's part of it. I don't know that retirement will ever be for me. Slowing down and setting my own schedule, definitely. But I want to be doing something challenging.
But there's new and different challenges. That's what I love about it. And
Hmm.
I think that's what people have to reframe work from being bad. Your
Yes.
work can be good, but you might have to seek out and create the type of work that you want, kind of like
Yes.
you're doing and you're reframing it. I also want to touch on another interesting point because I get this question from a lot of people that are like, why don't you just wait to do this business stuff when you fully retire in your 60s? Why do anything on the side of your engineering career? Since you're similar like me, where you are doing stuff on the side while you're still working, what do you think about that, or what would you say to that?
Well, I think it's important to have hobbies or side hustles or other things that we're passionate about. One, because I think it stimulates a part of our brain that maybe we're not getting through our full-time roles, but also it gives us sort of a leg up to that next career. Or I'm trying to think of the term you were using before, the for a career like later in life.
Encore career?
Encore career. Yeah, I
Yeah.
think it's sort of that leg up for an encore career. And I don't know if this resonates with you, but I'm not a social media queen. I didn't grow up with the phone in my hand, like
Me
taking
neither.
selfies and doing all that. And so it's been a steep learning curve for me just to even know how to, be on LinkedIn. And the easiest way to learn is just put yourself out there. And I
Yes.
know, like, probably for you as well as me, my first probably 100 posts were disastrous. And so you learn and iterate and grow, and then you know how to scale and you learn how to build the business. But you
Yeah.
also know how to build a business. You learn how to build it off of LinkedIn as well. And so there's a learning curve there. And if I wait till I'm 65 and fully retired, then I don't know that I'll have the energy or the desire then.
I agree. I
I'm
agree.
learning.
And like we're talking about, you get better because you put in the reps, and then
Hmm.
also just the more you do, the more you get clarity. Because I meet so
Yes.
many people, um, and they're like, I want to help people, I want to do a business, and that's great, but that's really nebulous, right?
Right.
And I admit I was like that years and years ago. But that seed has to like germinate into something. I'm like, help people
Hmm.
how? What type of
Yes.
business? Yeah, the sooner you figure that out, because building a business is hard. But I love that you agree with that too, because I think it's I wouldn't say it's the best way to do it, but if you think about it, you can have two full complete. I mean, you've had more careers than that. You've started businesses, you've done other things, but you can reinvent yourself. You can have different chapters, right? So imagine if you waited till you're 65. You did the traditional. Um, you wouldn't have very long to do it.
Yeah.
And at
True.
that point it might just be more of a hobby, because it's like, well, I have enough money, and if I doesn't really pan out, I'm good. But there's something about, you really want to make it work, and you put everything you possibly could into it. And
Right.
I love that too. So yeah.
That's a good point. I love that point.
Yeah. So what do you think
Awesome.
is coming next for you in this chapter and beyond? And like you said, you gave yourself a goal of 6 to 9 months
Yeah.
to replace your income.
Well, one thing I've stumbled into it, but I'm actually excited about it is, and I think you've done this as well. I've started speaking, and I never saw that kind of being as a, I don't want to say it's a pivot. It's actually tied to what I do.
Yes.
And so I've gotten 3 opportunities to speak this fall. And so it's kind of ignited kind of a desire to grow. As you know, I talked about, hey, I've been trying to learn how to do social media, and I'd hired a coach, early on when I started in that. So I, much like you, I hired a speaking coach several months ago, and now I'm part of a speaking cohort, and I'm learning, and I'm with, some really top-notch speakers, and I learn from them every month that I spend time with them. So it's another way for me to get in front of an audience. It's also a way to drive interest towards my business, but it's also an opportunity to share with other
Yeah.
people, and I'm enjoying that a lot. And so that's something, it's sort of the next pivot that I'm kind of moving into, and it's adjacent. I'm not abandoning my career coaching, but I'm using it as another way to kind of market my career coaching.
I
But
agree.
I'll get paid eventually, to speak, for some of
It
these other
forces you
events.
to grow a completely different skill set and do
Yes.
things that you never thought you could do. And it's funny, I get the same questions where it's, whenever you talk about speaking, it's, people seem to think like, oh, that's what you're becoming now. I'm like, no, 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 let's
No.
not get it twisted. That's in
Yeah.
service of my business.
Right. Yeah.
Because the thing is, you can't really also be a speaker very much if you don't have a message or anything you're
Right.
talking about. Like, what are you speaking about? So you kind of have to figure out what you're all about and what's your message, and then you can go speak. But I love speaking way more than I thought I would. I'm still terrified every single time I speak in front of a big
Yes.
audience, but it's still the best feeling ever.
Yeah.
There's a quote, I can't remember, I think it's John F. Kennedy. He said, the only reason to speak is to change the world.
Oh, wow,
Yeah.
that's powerful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you think about it, because it's just like maybe one person in that audience takes action. It's not even always about
Yeah.
the size of the audience and the impact you can have on someone else's life. And
Yeah.
it's just, yeah, I love that. Yeah. So in your business, what type of services do you offer? How do you work with people?
Well, I have a coaching offer, and I do individual one-on-one coaching, and then I also have, I call it pay by the drink. It's my hourly coaching rate. Most people go for my coaching package, and there's some elements of that package that I think are sort of unique to me that I've chosen to manage my business this way. But I charge a one-time upfront fee, but then I work with people until they land. This is a really tough market, and I feel like it's so important to be able to help people in the journey until they land. And I was noticing a few months ago, most of my clients were landing between 8 and 12 weeks. It's taking longer, particularly if they're higher up the leadership chain, but it's taking more like 12 to 24 months on average. But I work with clients that have been looking a year. But I work on different aspects. I think I touched on this earlier. We start with mindset. I have to figure out where they are. We put together a strategy. We put together, their goals and ideas for what they want next in their next role. And then we also work on resumes and LinkedIn profiles, and I prep people for the interviews. There's a lot more interview cycles now. I
Yeah.
teach people to own their voice and to bring in storytelling, because storytelling is so crucial. Networking is probably the most important thing. And a lot of people, particularly in STEM, The number is somewhere between 75 and 85% of people in STEM are introverts. And so the thought of networking completely terrifies them. And so I help break it down so that it feels more natural and it's not what people think in terms of you have to go into a room of 2,000 people and you don't know a soul. That's really not what networking is. It could be that, but so I teach them to kind of own their voice and how to reach out to opportunities. Another thing that I offer my clients is helping them find opportunities
Mm,
because I kind of use the reverse of, my staffing and recruiting background where presented opportunities. And so I know how to go find a lot of opportunities that
that's
are,
hard too.
yeah, through their network that are off of LinkedIn and Indeed. There's a lot more out there that people, don't know about. So I help present opportunities to them. And like I said, I stay with them until they land. So that's
Wow.
very different because most coaches, I believe, I've had people come and say, I had a 1 hour session and I got 2 PDFs and they charged me an arm and a leg. And I'm like, wow, that's heartbreaking to me. So I
Yeah.
really want to help
Because
people.
most coaches don't want to guarantee anything, right? They're
I
like,
don't I don't guarantee anything, but I will.
in a sense, because they're like, you're staying with them until they get a
Yep.
job. So it's like, I'm
Yep.
sticking with you until you land something.
Yeah. But I also hold them accountable. So there's a few of them. I actually have more problem with people ghosting me and I'm like, what happened to you? And they're like, well, I'm depressed or whatever. And I'm like, let's shake it off. Let's get moving. And so, yeah. So I think supporting people through the process, it's worked for me. Some people go, oh man, you would just end up losing so much business. And I have not found that at all. I found it just motivates people. It really does.
Yeah, yeah, because you're showing I'm investing in you. You need to, even if you don't believe in yourself right now enough or have enough hope, I
Yeah.
believe in you, so you better show
Right.
up for yourself. And then, what is the ideal type of person that you like to work with?
Well, I mean, obviously my entire career has been spent in technology, so that's an area that I know and understand really well. So I generally like to work with people that have been in a technology field, a STEM field. I would say my sweet spot are really middle to senior level executives. These are people that are either they're wanting to make that first jump into a leadership role, or either they're in their first leadership role and they're wanting to bump up to that next level and they're really having trouble getting there. I work with a lot of senior level technology professionals and helping them share their story and frame their experience. And I find a lot of them are in a similar position that you and I've been in, that this is the first time in their career they've been able to step back and go, what do I really want for this next
Yeah,
stage, and helping them do that. So if I can help people in any of those particular scenarios, I think they're an ideal client for me. And they have to be motivated. But I find that typically if they reach out, they're motivated. There's something that made them reach out and schedule
yeah.
a discovery call with me.
Probably at that level, I could imagine, because I think this is true. The higher you get, you realize how much people have helped you, and you're
Mm,
willing to pay for people's expertise.
yeah.
It's like, what do they say? Younger people or people with less money, they have more time, right? They're willing to spend
Right.
more time. The farther up you get, or like, like a busy mom of three is not like, I don't want to read like 1,000 PDFs and listen to podcasts for so many hours and stumble through and try to figure this out on my own. I want someone that's kind of done it already and can tell me and show me, and that like fast forwards them, right? And
Right.
yeah, yeah. So
Well, you nailed something unique, I think. I would say 90% of my clients I'm not even connected to. They just came across one of my posts or they saw something, or a lot of them said that they Googled, career coach and tech, and I popped up really high in the searches. But they said, but as soon as I look at your profile and I see, oh, she's already done what I'm trying to do, they're like, it's intriguing, and so they've reached out to me.
yeah, I
Um,
think that's so much more credible. I know it's not a condition to be a coach, but
right.
for me, I think it'd be hard to hire someone that hasn't like blazed the path of whatever I
Hmm.
want.
Right.
I guess I don't know why people, I consider that like a criteria, right? I want to
Yeah.
know they did it and they've got to what I'm trying to get. And then I'm like, okay, yeah, I want to hire you. Yeah.
Right. And that's honestly most of my clients, that's the line of questioning they go down because they're like, "Okay, I want to know about this. You made this move from here to here. How did that happen?" And after a while they're like, "Okay, you're legit. Like I can tell you've walked where I want to walk, and so I'm really interested in working with you." So, it's always interesting, and that's my ideal client.
Oh man, we can keep going. Okay, I have just
Yeah.
one
Yeah.
more question because you made me think a bit through this question. Okay, because there's so many coaches, career coaches, and out there, and not putting anyone on blast. What do you think is a criteria, or what is a red flag when someone is looking for a career coach that they're not a good person, or not? I wouldn't say a bad person. Would not be a good fit to career coach them.
Well, it goes back to what we were previously saying. If they have not done what you're trying to do, that's sort of a red flag for me. Also, I hate to say tenure, but if someone, has only been in a professional career for a couple of years and they're going to guide me and I can't see anything in their background that would say that they understand what I'm trying to do, that's a red flag. I think you've got to have somebody that really is familiar with your industry. Some people disagree, but I'm like, if you're in technology, I would love to have somebody that can walk the walk and talk the
It's
talk.
very different.
Yes, it's very different. And so I think those are some elements that have to be there. And I think social proof, I easily offer up. I've several people who've talked to me. I'm like, would you like to talk to one of my references live? They would be happy to speak with you. And they're like, oh, yeah, I would definitely do that. So I don't have any qualms about letting them speak with someone that I've worked with or has worked with me in the past. So I think references
Yeah.
and being able to
I think
show.
you brought up a good note about the niche too, because just from having other friends and colleagues and in other industries, the way they interview and get hired is very, very, very different. Like the medical
Yes,
industry, it's just all credentials. They
right.
just show up. It's a very social. I mean, it's not really even like an interview. And just the way we interview and like salary negotiating and
Yes,
titles, and it's entirely, entirely different. And a lot of people don't get that. And it's funny when I tell people about how, sometimes you interview like not right now, but I've gone through that before where you go through hundreds of interviews and people are like, I would never do that. Because there are industries where they don't have to do that. They just show up and they're just gonna they like a nurse. They're not gonna have the most intense job interview.
right.
It's just, are you a nurse? And like
Yeah,
and it's. So when I see these people that kind of brand themselves as just career coach, I'm like, but for what? And
right.
like what type
Yes,
of jobs and for who? And it's all so different. And how can we all have a whole lifetime of spending time in every single industry, understanding all the different, I don't know how people can do that sometimes, but yeah.
right. I agree. And there's a lot of people that rip people off too. I've had clients come to me going, I can't even tell you how much money I paid and it was worthless. And that's heartbreaking to me.
Yeah. And see, it's one of the downfalls of coaching is you're not really supposed to guarantee anything, right? They're supposed to put
Yeah,
in the work. But I guess you're kind of, not as a guarantee, but you stick with people till like you're going to get something.
right. Yeah, and they do. I believe in them and they're going to land. Now, there's some people I can tell on the intake that they're not a good client for me and I'll
Okay.
pass.
But it's
Yeah.
about like vetting them out and finding the right people who are like, yes, I
Yes.
want to invest in you.
Yeah.
We're going
And
to get
so
you a job.
yeah,
Yeah.
everyone who reaches out, I don't work with because they're a lot of people. I have had people going, I need you to absolutely guarantee I'll have a job in 12 weeks. And I'm like, I can't. I'm like, because the bulk of the work is on you and I'm taking the risk on you. And so I said, I'm not interested in working with you because I can't.
Okay. Well, thank you
We
so
could
much for
talk
this
forever.
conversation.
This is
I know
fun.
we can go on and on. There's so much,
Yeah.
there's so many other things. But as we end, just let people know where they can find you if they want to reach out to you.
Yeah. Well, obviously, I'm on LinkedIn under Ruth Smith Tech. And also, if you want to reach Ruth Smith Technologies, my LinkedIn handle. But if you want to reach out to me, Gmail, ruthsmithtech@gmail.com is my email address. And follow me on LinkedIn for a regular post and send me a DM, schedule a discovery call if you're interested in
Yeah. Her posts are really
technology.
good.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
technology related roles.
Yeah, yeah, and you post a lot and your content's really good. So at the very least, follow her and you can kind of get to know her over time. And the other thing I like about you too, you're like me. We just focused on one platform. We're
Yeah,
not on every single.
exactly. I can't do another one. It's all I got right now, Sandra, to do this one.
Yeah, it's like I'm just focusing on mastering one for now. So yeah,
This
thank
is
you so
great.
much for
Well,
this.
thank you for the invite. I really enjoyed this convo. It's been
Yeah,
great.
let me. Okay, it stopped.